Hi all, a very interesting game encounter in the Norway tournament. Magnus Carlsen against Hikaru Nakamura. So this is in round 3. So let's see what happened in this game. E4 for Magnus. We have a Sicilian defense. And we go into a very exciting Najdorf variation. And the most common moves in Livebook, you can remember this as bishop e3, bishop g5, bishop e2, bishop c4. And f4, f3, all of these are really quite common. And down the list after that is h3. I think Fischer used this a number of times. We have g6, which is a little bit unusual actually. E6 is more commonly seen, for example, like this, with black sometimes playing d5 immediately. But maybe this would favour Magnus Carlsen's style. So we see now g6. So g3, often g4 is played. That's one of the often used points to fianchetto the bishop, and maybe at some point g5 might be handy even. But the idea often is about this d5 square. So this seems a little bit more solid, but maybe a little bit less aggressive than g4. We have knight c6, bishop e3, Nakamura fianchettoing and then castling. And now knight d7, with the idea sometimes that black might just want to take on d4. And yeah, I know it seems a bit strange to just want to get rid of the dark square bishop, but he's not keen to go for any pawn breaks right now. White plays b3, which is subtly weakening the dark squares a bit, but it's in preparation of a later c4. And now we do see just basically simplification and setting up the dark squares a bit, particularly c5 for the knight can be set up. So in a way, yeah, white's dark squares have been weakened, but so has black's. But are these that exploitable? We see bishop b7, c4, e5, and now b5, trying to weaken white's structure on the queen side. I don't think it makes sense to try c takes here. It gives black a little bit of piece activity to play c takes. Let's see, c takes, in fact immediately bishop takes d5, a takes. It's just activating black really on the queen side. So that would be maybe even a tiny bit better for black. So instead Magnus accepts the impact of that. So he plays rook c1, rook ac1, b takes, rook takes. Now there is a 2-to-1 pawn majority. We see bishop takes d5, so further simplification from Nakamura. He's not trying anything too wild and exciting. He's lost perhaps far too many games against Magnus, trying to be a bit too enterprising in some people's view. So here it seems he's playing a very solid game with dark square grip now. But things nevertheless are pretty exciting now, because after a3 here, f5, yeah, even without a dark square bishop there, f5 pushing sometimes for f4, b4, white is going into the c6 square. Isn't this really dangerous now? Well, we have f4, that's actually taken here. I'm not sure it's too good to allow f3 at some point. It's taken here. Let's see if any other interesting, say queen e4. This should be, yeah, it looks pretty interesting for black actually, this position, with queen b8 holding d6. That could activate that rook, and you know, black's got counterplay there. If he gets b5 for d6, this should be okay. And if this rook joins forces, then the rooks are coordinating, and black might have some significant threats soon. So yeah, interesting decision. It's taken actually, even though you might think, well, structurally it's a bit compromising. But now e takes, yeah, not rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, and actually white's doing very well here. He's got that extra pawn, and yeah, the point here, black's point, is to play e takes and sacrifice d6. So you might think now, hold on, isn't this really good for white, and in fact 2 ways to take on d6. Rook takes d6 though, f3 comes in. If say here, then there's queen g5 check, and we can pick up that rook, maybe even more favourably in this position, totally winning. So this f3 is really quite dangerous. So basically, yeah, in this position, if f3, bishop f1, and the rooks, you see that they're holding each other, so this queen g5 check isn't the same. So that loose piece liability immediately to the fore here. White has queen g3. So the way Magnus has taken on d6 is to keep the rooks protecting each other against something like f3 and queen g5 check. So isn't that a clear pawn up? Queen g5 anyway, threatening now f3. King h1, f3 happens, looking at the rook, but the rook's protected at the moment. Bishop f1, knight f6. We have queen e6. It seems logical to pin the rook, but there's other moves here like queen g3 which are interesting. This position, black dare not take on d5 because the bishop c4. So what does actually black do in this position? Maybe knight e4. It's very, very interesting. It looks scary actually. Maybe more scary for black with this d6. So yeah, there are other ideas apart from the natural pinning move. Seems logical, but queen g3 might be interesting here. Queen e6 was played, so king g7 unpinning, and now we have rook c7. Some speculation in this position: can white do a bit better than rook c7? Let's see, d6. I think black might have sufficient resources here. For example, rook e4 and rook g4 to at least try and get a draw here. So this is like going to be very, very good for black. After queen d4 check, rook f6, and black is winning. So this rook g4, this idea of rook e4, rook g4 with tempo is pretty strong here. So white in this position would have to be very, very careful. Something like this, and just accept a draw. Can't take that and just accept a draw by repetition. So there's some very, very interesting variations here on d6 in this position. But okay, sorry. King g7, so d6 wasn't played. We have actually rook c7. So immediately asking black about that rook. That's taken, and now ingenious king h6. On the dark squares, black has always been slightly more favourable, and the king is much better off on h6 than at h8. If the king went to h8, it's big trouble. Queen e7, tying down an entire rook to defend g7, and this passed pawn is looking winning. So with b8 coming and queen g7, so basically excellent square for the king in the circumstances. Queen e1, rook a2. Black is active, very active. Even though he's a pawn down, he's got good activity now, and now very good move to secure a draw. Black to play. White might be threatening rook e5, but black to play here. What would you play with black to try and secure a draw against Magnus Carlsen? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now, black to play. Okay, knight g4, threatening knight f2. Not too much for white to do here. With that pawn on f3 is very, very dangerous. This is taken. Check, check, and it's perpetual check time. So yeah, I don't normally show you draws, but between these two, very, very exciting games, regardless of the result quite often. I thought this was a pretty exciting game, with black losing d6, but having the king on h6 and able to use this f pawn to get a very, very dangerous form pawn, which is one of my favourites for winning games quite often with the form pawn, but here helping secure a draw in this particular game example, that form pawn. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.